Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Frank Bria. He is going to be perfect for what a lot of you are thinking about, and that is how do I scale and grow and get ready for that next phase in life? So he is author of Scalable Consulting, Use a High-Ticket Program to Transform Your Six-Figure Practice into a Seven-Figure Enterprise. Whew, I have to take a deep breath after saying that because that's a lot that you said in that title. And I think Frank also comes out of fintech, has worked with startups and with consulting companies. One of the things that he talks about is how do you productize a service business. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself that I've just sort of glossed over, and then let's get into productizing a business and what that really means.
Sure. Thanks, Lois. I really, first of all, thanks so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it. I describe myself as a recovering consultant. If there was a 12-step program for consulting, I would probably have formed it by now. But I started off in fintech, a couple of tech startups. We sold a few, crashed a few, but from there, developed a consulting practice. A lot of the companies that we worked with and people who knew us uh, wanted to continue the expertise that I had started in those startup companies. And so, I became the "Hey Frank, we need you in Johannesburg in 3 days" guy, which sounds great. When you start, it's like, okay, you're needed all over the world. I've consulted with companies on 5 continents and traveled all over the world. It sounds amazing until you get stuck in it, and you realize that it's all you've created and that it's just you and there's nothing else left. You talk so much about building a legacy. The problem with consulting is that there's no legacy fundamentally. It's you as the job, it's you as the product, and when you move on, there's nothing really there. And I mean that just from a business perspective as well, from an overall give back to the world perspective. If you spend so much time just you being the deliverable, it's really tough for you to have the time to do bigger things. And then as a business model, there really is literally nothing to hand off. You can't sell a consulting agency when you are just the product, because once you move on, there's nothing left there to buy. So
That is
that's
so
the yeah,
that is
sorry,
so
good.
true. And when you're building something, you build it to sell it, right?
Right. Right. Well, and that's exactly the sort of realization I came to. I was I remember one day I was in Kiev. I had flown to Ukraine for this great meeting. People all over Eastern Europe were coming to listen to me talk about what it is that I needed to share with them. And I got a text message as I walked into the meeting. One of my family members had to go to the hospital, and emergency surgery, and was going to be there for days. And I had kids. They weren't super young, but they were, young enough to not be left alone for 3 days, that suddenly were at home alone. And so, I got to get family and neighbors and stuff to come over and take care of them for a couple of days, as I needed to make my way back home. And, I don't know if you're familiar or not, but there's not a direct flight from Kiev to Phoenix. So it's a long and winding journey over 36 hours, but I had to do the unthinkable, which is to stand up in the middle of a meeting where everyone had flown in to hear me talk and say, "I'm sorry, I have to leave right now. I have to go I have an emergency. I have to go to the airport." And during that long 36-hour journey home, it gives you time to think about the choices you've made. And the realization I came to was that I've just really created the worst job in the world. That's all I really did. Is I built a job that paid well, but that was all it was a job, and I was just working for me. But I didn't have a business. And if I had an emergency or I wanted to take time away, and it wasn't just that emergency. I mean, there were soccer games I missed. There were ballet recitals that I couldn't go to and things like that. And all of those little things start to add up, and you start to realize, wait a minute, I wanted to do this to create some freedom for myself. I wanted to be in business for myself, to be able to make choices about the things that I spend my time on. But If I'm the product and I don't show up, then I don't get paid. And that is a problem. So I began this journey of, okay, well, we got to change everything. Things have to change. And obviously I have to scale, which means I can't be the product anymore. I got to change what I do. And that's what really kicked everything off is this realization that, hey, I've got to become a scalable service business.
So is that what you refer to when you say productize your service? Okay, so
Yes.
how does one do that?
Yeah,
That's
that's
a great point because think of the thousands of people who have created just exactly that scenario for themselves.
right. And one of the myths is that you can't scale a consulting company. A lot of people think, hey, you just can't do it this way. And I thought that was true too. At the time where I realized I was going to have to change, I thought I was going to have to give up my entire career in fintech, and that all of these analytics companies and banking companies and everything that I've been working with that we're going to have to throw out the window. But in fact, you don't have to do that. But productization requires you to focus first on outcomes. And that's really what a lot of consultants don't do. Because as a consultant, I didn't have to worry about the outcome. I was the product. People wanted me, they wanted my knowledge, they wanted my expertise, and that's what they were hiring. And now, in order to productize it, it couldn't be about me and my knowledge. I had to distill it down to some kind of a system that created an outcome. And what's scary about that for a lot of service businesses is that it, in some sense, narrows you in a little bit, right? And you maybe throw out some client work that you would have otherwise done. And that's scary, because it feels like you're giving up potential revenue. But in some sense, it's very much like any other marketing exercise where we talk about niching down and finding a focus. We're doing the exact same thing, except we're doing it with our product and not just with our ideal client type. So that's the first step. The first step is, what is the outcome I'm trying to create for my client? And focus in on that. That becomes then the product rather than me or my expertise.
So, okay, so once you look at outcome, for me, I'm a systems type person, so I love looking at processes, outcomes, and measurement.
Yeah,
And so I'm going backwards from that. You've got a process that you've put in place. It's a systematic product process that's reproducible. Am I correct?
that's absolutely right. And so once you've identified this outcome as the thing you're selling, you have to be able to replicate that on a regular basis. This is the productization part. So there is a system or a set of steps that takes your client from where they are today to the place they want to go. And this is the part that it's often helpful to get some outside perspective on, because oftentimes we don't think we have a process, like it's magic. I have a secret sauce. I just do my magic. But actually, if someone from the outside is looking in at it, they can kind of say, oh, so what you're really doing is first you do this, then you do that, then you do this. And a lot of times when I've worked with people, they'll go, oh, that is what I'm doing. That's true. And that outside perspective is sometimes necessary to see it. But yes, you want to break down this process, this path that you're taking your client on, into 3 to 5 what I call stages. And the reason I use the word stage is because oftentimes what we're doing is complex. And so, you know, there's first of all, I have to, get a domain name, and then I have to register it with this person. Then I have to go do this design. And then, you could end up with a lot of steps. And what's challenging about that is that if you try to sell that, it's too complicated, and people don't like complex. Complication doesn't sell. Um, Simplicity sells, and your job as the service provider is to make the complex simple, is to create order from chaos. And so you want to take all of those 79 steps that it takes you to get from A to B, and break them down into major stages, 3 to 5 stages that your audience, that your client can understand, so that they think about it in a simplistic way. Oh, I get it. Like you do this and then you do this and then you do that. Um, and that is what I like to call a proprietary process. That's your secret sauce.
Okay, so I want to go to your productization concepts, the products you
Yeah.
can sell. So part of each of the steps that you're putting in place, in my thinking, what that means is you are doing it so you can hand it off to somebody. I can sell this platform. I can sell this program, almost like a franchise would do to a
Yeah.
franchisee. I have this concept, you buy it, you can turnkey it, you will have this outcome because I have done it. I know that this is the outcome if you follow the process. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And so it comes down to how you then deliver those stages, right? So it if it's all just me showing up and doing my thing, then I haven't really bought myself anything, right? So we talk about deliverability in productization. So it's almost like, if I was going to ship pens, manufactured things, widgets, I would be able to identify it and touch it and feel it and say, this is it. Well, we have to do the same thing with services. And what's interesting is that if you break it down, there are really only five scalable methods of delivering services.
Oh,
And and
interesting.
and in many of them we're very familiar with. And so the first one's virtual training, where, online course or something like that, but virtual training. The second one is masterminds. And I want to pause for a second there, because when I talk about a mastermind, I'm talking about a real mastermind, which means this is 8, 10, 12 people getting together, all with a common goal of achieving some objective. And they sort of help themselves. They're their own support group. And your job as the mastermind leader is almost like the facilitator. You're going to facilitate them, but you're not the guru. That's something else.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's one of the most misunderstood concepts right now. There's so many mastermind groups out
Yes,
there,
that's right. Right.
and many don't produce a result because they
Right.
really haven't thought through what their purpose is.
Right.
So I want to come back to that a little bit more. Okay, so that's the
Sure.
second.
That's the
What's
second one. The third one's group coaching, which is the thing that people misunderstand oftentimes as masterminds. Group coaching is different. Group coaching is you are the guru, and you are there to mentor a group of people in applying certain things that you've taught them. So there's a mentorship element to group coaching. You are there to serve as the example. You've been there before, so you can help people through it. Uh, then fourth, we have done for you services, which people get confused about because they think, wait a minute, Frank, you just said scalable. So how are done for you services scalable? Very, very specifically, done for you services are like a manufacturing process, right? We do the same thing every single time. You give me an audio and I turn it into a transcript, or you give me a blog post and I disseminate it on social media. Like, very specific process, which is repeatable. There's no custom work. There's no tailoring. It's a very, very specific manufactured process, basically. And finally, the last one are live events and workshops. So those are the five: virtual training, masterminds, group coaching, done for you services, live events and workshops. And that's it. And if you stick with those, if those are your deliverability mechanisms, you're scalable. You will be scalable. So it doesn't matter how you put them together. They're kind of like Legos. Once you've got those five Lego pieces, you can put them together in any amazing way and create a productized service, which allows you to put these components together and remain scalable.
So the leap, I think, for many people, I want to come back to this, but I want to move on to moving from a six-figure to a seven-figure practice, because I think
Yeah.
many people can get to the six-figure. Making the leap past that to the seven-figure, please talk about that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting when you look at we did a little bit of research a couple of years ago with US Census data, and you can look at business sizes by category. So if you look at consulting businesses as a category, there's this barrier around 250 to $400,000 a year in revenue. It's fascinating. It gets up there and then it doesn't go much higher than that. And so this six-figure barrier that people experience in consulting or service businesses, it's real. I just want your audience to know it's real. It's not just you. There is really an income barrier there, and it comes down to business model. And what's fascinating, if you look at software companies or you look at other organizations, there's no income barrier there. They push on through past into seven figures. And the secret is, it's not that much of a secret, but the secret is reproducibility. It's replicability. And anyone who's a successful service business owner knows it's challenging when you have to have this one-to-one relationship between hours and dollars. There's going to be a natural barrier. And so many consultants I've talked to have said, I don't even know how to do this. I don't even have time to sell, let alone service another client. And so the very first thing you need to do to get from 6 to 7 figures is to shift that model. You have to break out of this individual, I am the product, and move into a productized, replicatable model, so that you can start adding in additional client base. That is where the income barrier lies. And what's really, really interesting is that no one would think that there's a relationship between these two things, but it really is. The reason that you don't have any time left to add a new client is the exact same reason you can't actually effectively sell a new client. Because a lot of people think, well, even if I brought somebody in, I have a hard time communicating to a new person. Like if it's my network or my Rolodex, I'm fine. But if I have to expand into a new audience or a new network, it's really difficult for me to sell. And the reason is the same. It's because nobody wants to buy you as the product. They want an outcome. And so this shift into a productized service turns out to be the answer for both of these problems simultaneously, which is really a fascinating discovery that we made.
So, what I'm hearing you say is that when you've made that shift to an outcome, you can hand it off to somebody else. Somebody else can go in your place to do the group coaching, how about masterminds?
Right. Or even do the done for you services. So if you think about what would shift, if you do custom project work, let's say you're an agency, like a marketing agency, and you do custom projects, if you shift over to a very replicatable process, guess what happens? Every single one of those steps has a very specific skill associated with it. And so now you can hire to that skill. Oh, I need somebody who's going to transcribe an audio file. Great. I know how to hire that person. Where if you stay with this, custom project or one-off project work, you have to have superstars just like you. And that's the real challenge that most consultants say they have in hiring people is I can't find anyone with my skill. I can't trust anyone to do what I do. Well, guess what? You are a superstar. That's probably the reason you're running your own business and that you're doing your own thing. It's very difficult to scale a hiring model where you can continue to have to find superstars. That's not sustainable. Instead, you need to identify the small skill sets necessary to build up this Lego structure and then hire specifically to those needs.
What's interesting is hiring for specific needs instead of having, I think one of the dangers that a lot of people get into is hiring people similar to you,
Right.
perhaps. Now you've got a payroll that is not affordable.
Right. Exactly. And it's hard to hire those people. They're hard to find, and they may not stick around for very long, right? They may be entrepreneurial like you, and they may want to do their own thing, and so you may spend a lot of time training and getting them up to speed, and then they move on. This is one of the most difficult things for consulting firms that try to grow by just growing a bench of great consultants. It's really difficult. It's expensive. And it's if you're just in the low six figures, it's difficult to have the payroll. You have this game of, well, I want to hire somebody and you have to pay them a lot of money, but I don't have a client to back it up. So even if I do have one client, that's not enough. It's just barely enough. And they don't want to come on half time or part time. And it becomes really challenging. It's a very difficult process.
So, I mean, you also have to be incredibly sure about what your system is. Otherwise, you can't do that, right?
Right. That's right.
And I think a lot of people begin with sort of a muddle through mentality, and that doesn't work. I want to come back to masterminds though, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of masterminds out in the market. And I've been a part of some of those masterminds. Some have been good and some have been quite disappointing. So
Sure.
you look at that and you go, okay, what is the structure of that? Do you also, for each of these items, put together outcome perspectives so people know when they come to the mastermind, there's an outcome to be achieved?
Yes. The outcome orientation is the number one key driver of success of these programs. So, but
Everything.
yeah, one of the first things I'll say is there's never one right way to do anything, right? There's tons of different ways and lots of people are different. But what I will say is, we've had the opportunity in working with a number of different companies to see these programs from the inside out at I mean, my team and I have worked with dozens and dozens of these companies from the inside, and I've trained thousands of entrepreneurs on how to do this. And so I can tell you there are keys to success. There are best practices. And what you're looking for in the design of a really good program is three things. First of all, you need skills. You need to be able to teach skills to your audience. There are going to be very specific things that they have to do in order to get to this outcome, and you need to teach those skills. That's usually not the problem. Usually people teach a lot of skills, but the other two pieces often are missing. Accountability is huge. Your client needs accountability. There's just no way around it. And I hear a lot of entrepreneurs in service businesses say, listen, I'm going to teach you how to do it. Whether you do it or not, it's not my problem. That's up to you to it. But you know what? It is your problem. It's actually not just your problem, it's your responsibility. I believe every service business owner has an accountability to their client to make sure that they get the results that they signed up for. And that means you need to have a system in place for accountability, that your client does the thing that you've asked them to do. And so this is often missing from programs, to have any kind of follow up or, oh, have that done by Friday. And then on Friday, we check in and find out that they didn't do it. Well, guess what? That's too late. That's not when you should be checking in. You should be checking in a couple of days ahead of time to make sure the client has everything they need and that they're on track. It's not helpful if it's late, right? And so that's the second thing. And the third is mentorship. Mentorship is my definition of mentorship is helping your client apply the skills to their individual situation, because everyone's a little bit different. So they're going to learn skills, and as they apply them to themselves, they're going to find that they need some hints or some guidance or some adjustments. And it's your job as the mentor to help them through that process because you've done this before. So I look for these three things in any good program design: skills, accountability, and mentorship. I kind of call it the SAM profile. If you've got SAM in your program, then you've got a really good design. And interestingly enough, there's a high correlation between programs that fail and programs that don't have all three of these components in place.
When you do a mastermind group, how long are they for? Are they time limited? How do you structure that?
That's a great question. So Again, starting with outcome first. So everything is driven by outcome. What we find is that for an initial program, so if you have a brand new client you've never worked with before, um, the time horizon is fairly brief. In You want to get them results quickly, and so we find that 12 weeks is a pretty good guide for when their first big milestone should be met. 9 to 16 weeks, you can kind of play with it a little bit, but the idea is that somewhere in a 90-day time frame, your client wants a win. And so, if you, as that very first program, and we like to call it a core offer, if you put out a core offer, you should have some kind of a 12-week milestone in place. Now, after that, you want to continue working with them. Once they've gotten a little wind at their back, once they've got some assurity that you know what you're doing, and frankly, you also know that this is a client you want to work with for a long period of time, then you can move on to something bigger. And that next offer we like to call an ascension offer, and that can be for 12 months. And so it's good to have a long-term objective. When you enroll a new client in a program, you should be looking long-term. You should, point to the top of that mountain and say, we're going to go up there. That's where we're going. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get in shape, or the first thing we're going to do is reach the base camp or whatever it is, so that your client knows that you've got something big in mind for them. But they want quick wins. They want something immediately they can say was successful.
So what would be a reasonable 90-day offer?
Well, I mean, this would vastly depend on
Okay.
the company and the audience, but I'll give you a couple of examples. So I like to break down kind of audiences into what do people want, what do people really want when they buy something, and honestly, there's just four things, right? They want to make money, save money, stay out of jail, or have a better life. That's kind of it. Those are the four things. So let's take a look at a couple examples. Let's say it's a make money kind of an offer, right? So if you're working with businesses and you look at the next sort of 12 weeks, what can you get done in terms of revenue generation in 12 weeks? The mistake a lot of people make in an initial offer is they'll do the strategy work, but no execution of that strategy. So again, to make this a win, there needs to be some execution. So for example, in a 90-day offer, you may set up all the strategy. Maybe you've done avatar analysis, maybe you've done some market analysis, maybe you've done some offer work, maybe you've put some scripts together or some funnels together or something like that. And then you want to leave a little bit of room at the end of that program, maybe 4 weeks or something, to let your client execute on the strategies with you looking over their shoulder. So we tried on week one and we run into some trouble. Aha, that's what we have mentorship for. We're going to help, smooth out, iron out the issues, iron out the wrinkles, and then move on to week two. We execute again. So as long as there's some kind of, okay, well, let's get the first thing out, right? That's usually a good make money kind of an offer. But there are
So
also
are your,
people. Oh, sorry, go
I'm,
ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say there are also people in the better life personal development field, right? Where making money isn't the goal. And they have then the challenge of coming up with very specific outcomes for how you get this done. So I'll give you an example. One of my clients, she worked in she worked with female executives to help them get work-life balance. So that was her initial positioning. Now, that sounds great, but no one really knows what work-life balance looks like. There's not like a definition. You can't, if you have work-life balance walking down the street, you can't like go, aha, there's work-life balance. So it was challenging for her to sell that because no one really understood what that meant. They understood it's good, but they didn't really know what it meant for them. So we worked on repositioning that outcome. And this is what everyone in the personal development space needs to do, is to think through, how do you get a tangible outcome out of the work? So she realized that in the work that she did with her clients, they used work-life balance to get some outcome in their life. And that's often the question you have to ask yourself. So for her, it was, My clients achieve work-life balance because they want to go do something big for themselves and they don't have the time or the structure to do that. And so she repositioned what she did and she talked to female executives and said, we are going to set an audacious goal for the next 12 months and then we're going to achieve it. So for her, that first 90 days was we're going to create the strategic plan, basically the execution plan, and we are going to get the first step done. So that way they had a plan and some momentum. And it was so natural at the end of that 90 days to say, do you want to keep going? Do you want to keep finishing out the plan? And so upselling into the longer term was just such a natural movement. Um, and it made the sales process beautiful. She brought women into this beautiful lunch she had done in a hotel and spent the entire hour having them imagine this big audacious goal. And they would talk about it. They'd write it down on a piece of paper. They'd stand up. They'd announce it to the rest of the group. Everyone was applauding and cheering and shouting, and it was great. People were hooked emotionally. And then at the end, she had the easiest sales pitch in the world. She said, "Who wants to get this done? Raise your hand." And then they were enrolled in the first part of the program. So it really is establish that long-term objective and get the first thing done. You really want some tangible outcome in the first 90 days.
Frank, time goes much too fast. I want to go talk about challenges. What are some of the
Sure.
biggest mistakes that consultants can make in the process of creating this?
I think the biggest mistake that people make, and I made this mistake, is to think that productization means cheap.
Oh,
So if you go from, I'm the product and I'm working with folks, I'm going to have to lower my prices to scale. That's not true. Price is about value, not about time. A lot of people think, well, I'm not taking up as much time anymore, so I have to charge less. No, that's not true. And even if we know in our heads that we're not charging by the hour, sometimes we still feel that scalability is not enough of me, and so it's of lower value. But we need to remember that value is in the eye of our client's outcome. So as long as we're getting them that outcome, it doesn't matter what the time frame is. And in fact, our client doesn't care. In fact, our client would rather have it go faster. If they can get to their outcome faster, they're actually happier and they're probably willing to pay more. So we need to anchor our price points, the investment levels of our programs in the outcome, not in the amount of time that it takes. And so,
great point.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you're doing corporate consulting, you're charging a lot, you can still charge a lot as long as you're providing a lot of value.
And I think one of the things that people don't do enough is to measure their result. So you have something concrete to talk about.
Right.
You want to say, I made a difference, but how do you really know? And I
Right.
think that is part of what you do when you're scalable. You have a measurable result that you can have others reproduce.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This concept of return on investment is incredibly important for a larger business. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Frank, anything we've missed that you are passionate about that people should think about?
Well, we kind of talked about it already, but I'll tell you what my big passion is. It is truly around service business owners taking accountability for their clients' results. Like I am really, really passionate about it. It's something that I think just is we don't talk enough about as entrepreneurs, as service business owners, as consultants. It's really easy to be flippant about, oh well, our client just didn't execute, and I don't think it does a service either to our clients or the industry. So, I say the very first thing you want to do is to make a moral commitment. I'm not talking about legal guarantees or money back or anything like that. I'm saying start on day one by saying, I am going to feel accountable for the results that my client gets. And you'll be amazed at what that changes about how you think about what your product is, how you think about how you engage with your client. And frankly, it affects the bottom line because your clients feel the commitment, they feel supported, and they're going to come to you much more quickly and be willing to pay more.
On that note, we will end. Um, It's those results, and it's how we're accountable for creating those results that makes the difference. Frank, you are a fount of wonderful wisdom. So thank you for sharing that with us today. And for those of you who are listening to Building My Legacy podcast today, thank you very much.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.